Welcome to a deep dive, one of the most chilling chapters in American history, Nat Turner's Rebellion. And we're going straight to the source for this one, the Confessions of Nat Turner. This document was recorded by Thomas R. Gray, who was a lawyer, just weeks after Turner's capture in 1831. It's a glimpse into the mind of a man who led a rebellion that shook the nation, and we're going to unpack it together.
What makes this document so fascinating is that it's a first-hand account. We're hearing these events unfold through Turner's own words, his motivations, his beliefs, and even justifications for the violence that took place.
So we're in Southampton County, Virginia, 1831, a time and place where slavery was deeply entrenched. And here's Nat Turner, a slave himself, leading this bloody uprising. What led him to this point?
Well, the Confessions take us back to Turner's childhood. He talks about being marked from birth. Literally, he had birthmarks that people saw as signs of greatness. And even as a child, he was recognized for his intelligence and his almost intense nature. It's as if people around him sensed that he was destined for something extraordinary.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. People see these signs, they treat him differently, and it shapes his own view of himself.
Exactly. And then you add in the influence of religion. Turner was deeply religious, and he interpreted scripture in a way that fueled his belief in his own special destiny. He saw himself as a prophet chosen by God to lead his people to freedom.
Now, I'm curious about those interpretations. Was he reading the same Bible as everyone else? What made his understanding so different?
He was absolutely reading the same Bible, but he focused on passages that spoke to liberation, to the overthrow of the wicked. One quote that stands out is when he says, "Was not Christ crucified?" He saw the suffering of Christ as a parallel to the suffering of enslaved people and believed he was destined to lead a similar fight for redemption.
So we have this foundation of a belief in his own destiny, this almost messianic complex. But then things take an even darker turn, right? He starts having visions.
Yes. These visions are a crucial part of the story. He describes seeing black and white spirits battling in the sky, blood on the corn, and strange symbols appearing in the woods. He interpreted these as signs from God messages urging him to take action.
These visions, they're almost like something out of a horror movie, wouldn't you say? It makes you wonder about the line between fervent belief and, well, something more troubling.
You're hitting on a key point. Were these visions genuine, or were they a manifestation of his own growing desire for rebellion? It's a question that historians continue to debate. What we do know is that Turner believed these visions were divine messages, and they solidified his conviction that the time for action had arrived.
And one of the most striking visions, the one that seemed to seal the deal for him, was a solar eclipse in 1830.
Right. He saw this natural phenomenon as a clear sign from God, a signal that the time for his uprising had come.
It's chilling to think about how a natural event, something that could be explained scientifically, could be interpreted as a call to violence. It speaks to the power of belief and the way it can be twisted to justify horrific acts.
And it's important to remember the context here. This wasn't just some abstract religious fervor. This was a man living under the brutal reality of slavery, seeing the suffering of his people every day.
So he's having these visions, he's convinced he's on a divine mission, but then things shift from internal contemplation to actual planning. He starts recruiting followers, right?
Yes, and it's a slow and deliberate process. He starts confiding in a small group of trusted individuals, sharing his plans for an uprising. And it's worth noting that he doesn't just choose anyone. He carefully selects those he believes are ready to fight for their freedom, those who share his conviction.
And this is where the story takes on an even more dramatic turn. We move from the realm of visions and prophecies to the stark reality of violence. The rebellion begins at his own master's house on August 20th, 1831. Can you tell us more about that fateful night?
Well, Turner and his small band of followers made a chilling pact to spare no one until they were sufficiently armed. They moved from house to house, killing white slave owners and their families. Turner himself described the need to spill the first blood, believing it was necessary to set the tone for the rebellion and instill fear in those who opposed them.
I'm struck by the level of brutality described in his confession. He goes into detail about the killings, almost with a sense of detachment. It's a stark reminder of the dehumanizing nature of slavery and the rage it could ignite in those who were subjected to it.
You're right, it's a very difficult passage to read. But it's important to remember that we're hearing this through Turner's own words, filtered through his own justifications and his belief that he was carrying out God's will. It's a complex and disturbing aspect of the story that we need to grapple with.
And as the rebellion unfolds, it grows in size and intensity. Turner's band swells with new recruits, and the violence spreads like wildfire across Southampton County.
Yeah, and it's important to understand the sheer terror that gripped the white population as news of the rebellion spread rumors and exaggerations. They ran rampant, fueling a sense of panic that far outstripped the actual number of rebels.
Yeah, you can imagine the chaos, families fleeing their homes, militias forming hastily. It must have felt like the very fabric of society was unraveling.
Exactly, and this is where we see a shift in the narrative. Turner's initial victories are met with increasingly organized resistance. The turning point comes at a place called James Parker's Gate.
What happened there?
Well, Turner and his followers, expecting another easy victory, were instead met by armed white men ready for a fight the rebels used to quick strikes, and overwhelming their victims, were caught off guard.
So this was the moment when the tide turned against them.
Yes, the battle at James Parker's Gate was a decisive defeat for Turner. His forces, outmatched and outgunned, were scattered. His dream of reaching Jerusalem, which had become a symbolic target for him, was shattered.
And what about Turner himself? What happens to him after this defeat?
He goes into hiding for 6 long weeks. He evaded capture, living off the land, constantly looking over his shoulder. It's a period of intense isolation and desperation. He describes it in his confession, and you can almost feel the weight of fear and disappointment pressing down on him.
It's like a complete reversal of fortune from leading this rebellion, believing he was on this divine mission, to being hunted like an animal.
It's a powerful contrast, and it's a reminder that even the most fervent beliefs can be shaken when faced with the harsh realities of defeat.
And eventually, his luck runs out.
Yes. The story of his capture is almost too ironic, a hunting dog drawn by the scent of food. Turner had hidden leads its owner to his hiding place.
Wow, talk about fate intervening.
He surrenders without resistance. He knew it was over. He was taken to prison in Jerusalem, Virginia, where he awaited trial.
And this is where Thomas R. Gray enters the picture again. Not just as Turner's attorney, but as the recorder of his confession. What was that dynamic like?
It's a fascinating relationship. You have Turner, this charismatic figure who led a rebellion, and Gray, this white lawyer tasked with documenting his story. Initially, Gray is skeptical of Turner's claims of divine inspiration. He even refers to him as a fanatic at one point. But as the confession unfolds, Gray becomes both repelled and captivated by Turner's unwavering conviction.
It's almost as if Gray is trying to understand the mind of a man he can barely comprehend.
Exactly, and you see that struggle reflected in the writing itself. At times, it's a straightforward recounting of events, but there are moments when Gray's own voice comes through expressing his astonishment, his horror, even a grudging admiration for Turner's intellect and determination.
The confession itself is a powerful document, but it's also incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
Turner describes the killings in detail, but often with a calmness that is chilling.
You're right. There's a detachment in his descriptions that is both fascinating and unsettling. It's as if he's trying to distance himself from the horror of what he's done to maintain this belief that he was merely an instrument of God's will.
And it's in these moments that you really get a sense of the complexity of Turner's character. He's a man driven by faith, convinced he's on a righteous mission, but also capable of incredible violence.
And that's the challenge for us as readers, or listeners in this case. How do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory aspects of his personality? How do we understand a man who could be both a spiritual leader and a cold-blooded killer?
And that's where the context becomes so crucial. We can't view Turner's actions in isolation. We have to understand the brutal reality of slavery, the dehumanization, the constant threat of violence that he and countless others endured.
Exactly. It's not about condoning his actions, but about trying to understand the forces that shaped him, the desperation that fueled his rebellion. And it's in that understanding that we can grapple with the larger questions about the nature of good and evil, about the corrupting influence of power, and about the enduring struggle for freedom and justice.
So we have Turner's confession, this raw and unsettling account of the rebellion, but we also have Gray's observations, his attempts to contextualize the events and understand the man behind them. And in the published confession, Gray includes something that really brings home the human cost of this uprising.
You're referring to the list of victims.
Yes, it's a stark reminder that this wasn't just an abstract historical event. These were real people, families torn apart by violence. It's a chilling testament to the devastating consequences of Turner's actions.
It's a sobering reminder that even in the pursuit of a just cause, there can be tremendous suffering. And it forces us to consider the ethical complexities of rebellion and violence as a means to an end.
And it's here in the aftermath of the rebellion that the conflicting narratives really come into focus. We have Turner's self-portrayal as a divinely chosen instrument, clashing with Gray's portrayal of him as a fanatic.
It's a tension that continues to this day. Was Turner a visionary leader fighting for the freedom of his people? Or was he a deluded zealot driven to commit horrific acts of violence? There's no easy answer.
Right, and we're left to grapple with these competing interpretations, recognizing that the Confessions of Nat Turner is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
And that's what makes history so fascinating, isn't it? It's not just about memorizing dates and facts. It's about trying to understand the past through the lens of the present, recognizing the complexities and contradictions and acknowledging that there are often more questions than answers.
And Nat Turner's rebellion has certainly continued to capture the imagination of writers and historians alike.
Absolutely. It's a story that continues to resonate with us because it speaks to some of the most fundamental questions about human nature, the struggle for freedom, the justification of violence, the power of belief.
And one of the most notable attempts to grapple with these questions came in the form of a fictionalized account of Turner's life.
You're talking about William Styron's novel, The Confessions of Nat Turner, published in 1967.
Right. Styron's novel, while ultimately a work of fiction, attempted to delve into the psychological and emotional world of Nat Turner. It sparked a lot of controversy.
Yes, some people felt Styron took too many liberties with the story, that he projected his own interpretations onto Turner's character. Others praised the novel for its attempt to humanize a figure who had often been demonized. It's a reminder that history is not static. It's something we're constantly engaging with, reinterpreting, and debating.
And in a way, that debate is a testament to the enduring power of Turner's story. It continues to challenge us, to make us confront uncomfortable truths about our past, and to grapple with the legacy of slavery and its impact on American society. So we've heard Turner's confession, we've considered Gray's perspective, and we've even touched upon Styron's fictionalized account. But what does it all mean? What's the lasting impact of Nat Turner's rebellion?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? This wasn't just some isolated incident. It sent shockwaves through the South and across the nation. It intensified the debate over slavery and exposed the deep divisions within American society.
It's like a crack in the foundation of the nation, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. And it had profound consequences. Southern states, terrified by the prospect of more uprisings, enacted even harsher laws to control enslaved people. They restricted movement, limited education, and made it even more difficult for families to stay together.
It's almost like the rebellion backfired in a way.
Yeah.
Instead of leading to greater freedom, it resulted in even more oppression.
In a way, yes. But it also had the opposite effect. It fueled the abolitionist movement in the North, providing powerful evidence of the brutality of slavery and the desperate need for change. Turner's name became a rallying cry for those fighting for emancipation.
So it's a complicated legacy. On the one hand, it led to increased suffering for enslaved people, but on the other hand, it helped galvanize the movement that would eventually lead to their freedom.
Right. And that's why it's so important to look at history from multiple perspectives. There are rarely simple answers or clear-cut heroes and villains.
So for you listening, here's something to ponder. We've had this deep dive into Nat Turner's rebellion through his own words, as recorded by Thomas R. Gray. But as we've discussed, this document is just one piece of a complex and multifaceted story.
There are so many other voices to consider: the voices of those who were enslaved, the voices of those who fought against slavery, the voices of historians who have grappled with this event over the centuries.
It's a reminder that history is not just about the past. It's about how we understand and interpret those events today. It's about the questions we ask, the perspectives we seek out, and the connections we make to our own lives.
And the story of Nat Turner is a story that continues to speak to us today. It challenges us to think critically about the legacy of slavery, about the complexities of race and power, and about the ongoing struggle for justice and equality.
And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. We get to explore the past, challenge our assumptions, and come away with more questions than answers. And hopefully we leave a little bit wiser, a little bit more informed, and a little bit more engaged with the world around us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.